Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news here in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what here in the Holy Land, well, have no worries. I'm Tracy Alexander and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
Tensions are sharply rising in the settlements now as right-wing settlement heads turn their criticisms of Israeli annexations over towards the White House.
His patience quickly thinning. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is now strongly condemning the words of the Yesha Council chairman. This after the settler leader told Israeli media that the United States president's peace plan shows that Donald Trump is no friend of Israel's. The back and forth signaling a breaking down of negotiations between the Israeli premier and right-wing settlement heads from earlier this week. Netanyahu telling them to get on board with the Peace to Prosperity plan as they continue to reject it. The settlement bloc leaders demanding to see details of the annexations slated to progress July 1, while slamming the early drafts they say would force evacuations and establish a Palestinian state. Some in the group are even threatening to blow up the deal, accusing President Trump of only being interested in looking good ahead of elections. Still, Netanyahu and other right-wing leaders are banding together, rejecting these statements, saying that the United States' support is needed to expand the country's sovereignty, and insisting that President Trump is a great friend of Israel. Netanyahu listing achievements like recognizing Israel's sovereignty over Jerusalem and the Golan Heights, moving the United States Embassy to Jerusalem, and paving a way for absorbing the settlements in the first place.
Meantime, in a move being called nearly suicidal by a renowned analyst, the Palestinian Authority says it will no longer accept tax revenues transferred from Israel. It's part of Ramallah's efforts to void understandings and end coordinations with Israel. To remind you, PA President Mahmoud Abbas vowing to renege on existing agreements with the Jewish state in a bid to push back at Netanyahu's sovereignty extension plan. Considering the dire economic burden COVID-19 has placed on the West Bank and financial aid cuts by the Trump administration, expert analysis is suggesting that the only explanation is to prepare the public for escalations should the annexation vote move ahead come July 1st.
From internal security to border clashes in Israel's north, tensions with neighbouring Lebanon reaching heights not seen in years. Between Israeli and Lebanese military forces, Israel with tanks and Lebanon with rocket-propelled grenades staring each other down Tuesday, the United Nations peacekeepers having to step in and act as mediators. Israeli troops patrolling the border crossing the security fence, but remained on the Israeli side of the so-called Blue Line. Now, this comes as the IDF returned a Syrian national captured by Israeli forces last month after he crossed into Israel armed with a walkie-talkie. He was shot and taken to hospital. The IDF saying the man was spying for Iranian proxy Hezbollah in Lebanon, but has now been let go. Right, well, protests in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv overnight over the killing of a reportedly disabled Arab-Israeli man by Israeli border police over the weekend. Activists are calling for justice over the incident, which took place at a violent flashpoint at an East Jerusalem Old City gate. The circumstances which led to the death is being investigated, as Aaron Porras reports.
A heartbroken mother collapsing in the streets of Jerusalem's Old City, carried away after her son was fatally shot by Israeli police. 32-year-old Iyad Halak is said to have had a mental disability like autism. His mother was told that border police thought he was armed, and after Halak failed to follow their orders to stop at the Lion's Gate to the Old City, police began chasing the man on foot before shooting. Halak's father telling media he was on his way to a special needs school where he studied and may have been holding his cell phone, which police mistook as a weapon. A Border Patrol officer is now under house arrest as the case is being investigated. Security is being beefed up at the Temple Mount as the holy site reopens to worshippers today after the coronavirus lockdown. Jerusalem police are worried about potential unrest in response to the killing of Halak, and Palestinian factions are calling the incident a war crime, with Gaza's ruling body Hamas warning of an intifada. The incident comes after a string of terror-related incidents, the latest on Friday. Israeli soldiers thwarting a car ramming attack in the West Bank, shooting the suspect.
Well, the head of Israel's clandestine intelligence agency, the Mossad, has been busy. After using his connections with world leaders to secure critical life-saving equipment to stave off COVID-19, now it's reported Yossi Cohen has been making the rounds in a bid to get Arab countries on board with the United States peace plan. Arabic daily Al Arabi reporting Cohen secretly met with high-ranking Egyptian security officials in Cairo. Among the topics discussed, the newspaper reports Israel's plans to annex parts of the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. The Palestinian Authority, for its part, is now growing increasingly more frustrated, as Aaron Porras reports.
It's not just Israeli leaders that have drawn the ire of Palestinian Authority officials. Now Arab world leaders are also under fire, with the topic of annexations the fuel for the flames. The PA is now frustrated with nations like Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia because they're seemingly more concerned with their relationship with the US and thwarting Iran's influence than they are about Israeli plans for annexing parts of the West Bank or Judea and Samaria. Saudi Arabian authorities, for one, are telling Israeli media that they support Palestinian rights, but that they missed their chance to advance their interests under the more sympathetic Obama administration. Jordanian government officials saying that they'll not risk losing their religious authority over Muslim holy sites in Jerusalem because of the PA's refusal to negotiate too. Jordan's King Abdullah II would reportedly also prefer Israeli soldiers over Palestinian or Arab rebel forces patrolling the border between their two countries. The support for the Palestinian cause coming from Europe, though. Austria is the latest EU member to warn Israel against unilateral annexations of the West Bank or Judea and Samaria, saying it would violate international law. Regardless, there is 1 month left to go before the scheduled vote for approvals July 1st, and leading Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is moving forward. The plan includes extending sovereignty to some 130 Israeli settlements and outposts, while excluding residential pockets of some 50 to 65,000 Palestinians. PA President Abbas is threatening to end all cooperations with Israel and the United States over the move. But the pressure is up on the PA to come to the table and actually discuss the United States' new deal of the century.
Well, if your Instagram feed is anything like mine, you'll see black boxes dominating the screen as you scroll across users' profiles. It's part of a worldwide statement to stand up against racial discrimination, prompted by the killing of George Floyd in the United States. Tel Aviv holding its own solidarity rally overnight. Take a look.
No justice! No peace! No justice.
Raising their voices for racial equality, hand in hand for the Black Lives Matter movement. Hundreds of Israelis gathering along this Tel Aviv beachfront, calling for an end to what they say is racially targeted police brutality.
I believe that Black Lives Matter, and I believe that all human life is important, and institutionalized racism needs to stop.
I'm not American, I'm African, but it hurts me deeply because it could have been me or it could have been her.
As protests rage in the United States for the 8th day, Israelis overnight taking the knee outside the United States Embassy in a symbolic stance against the police killing of an unarmed black man, George Floyd, last week in Minneapolis.
If you want us to do better, then damn it, you do better!
Please, I can't breathe. The plea made by Floyd to the restraining police officer, now charged with third-degree murder and manslaughter, brandished on banners held by demonstrators of all races.
I'm here to show support, to be present, to take action, to do something, to be and to stand with humans of all races.
Peaceful but proud, Israelis of all backgrounds uniting, saying enough is enough.
Black lives what? Matter! What? Let me hear it a little louder! Let me hear it a little louder!
Chaya Lev, who immigrated to Israel from Texas, telling ILTV why she feels she needs to stand up against the issue.
Because I'm Jewish, I must speak out. This country has shown me that the amount of togetherness, I have to tell you, I tell my friends all the time, as American, here I'm just Israeli. I'm Israeli. In America, I'm an African American. Why? Why are we so divisive? I see it come together. See everyone come together for moments like this, for pride. And even if we hate each other in the shuk and we're like, no, but man, die, basta. When it goes down, we're together.
Many who now call Tel Aviv home after having moved from cities across the United States, saying Israel's voice is a necessary one to add to the conversation.
I think that this is a universal issue. It's not specifically an American issue. Obviously, there is a completely different context between what's happening in the United States and racism in other countries and racism here.
On the invitation to this rally, a line we've been seeing in many places. It reads, "In a time where being passively non-racist isn't enough, we can choose to be actively anti-racist."
I feel like the Jewish community here can relate to oppression, and Israel itself is a center of conflict, and there's like a magnifying glass on Israel. And as she said before, such problems are also happening in Israel. I think a year ago, the Ethiopians here were protesting against the same issues.
Signs with the names Solomon Taka, an Ethiopian man killed by police last year, and Iyad Halak, shot by police last week. Organisers reading out the names of people they say were victims of police brutality in Israel.
Give by the police! Give by the police! Give by the police!
The American Jews like to show all the pictures of Dr. Martin Luther King marching with Jewish leaders then, but often we're not showing solidarity and on the ground with African Americans or Palestinian Israelis who need our help here.
Tel Aviv is the latest city around the world to gather in solidarity against the killing of George Floyd, after other rallies like this one were held in cities like Toronto, London and Berlin.
Having a stance on other places also gives us a chance to look at ourselves and say what we want for our own society, what we want for the world.
Boston Jean, and many more.
Well, responding to the protests, Internal Security Minister Amir Ohana pleading with the public to be patient and not to import American problems to Israel. Take a listen.
לא לנסות ולהביא לכאן את מיניאפוליס ואת הפרעות ואת הפוגרומים. אני חושב שאנחנו במצב טוב יותר. אני חושב שאנחנו צריכים לשמור על הדבר הזה, לשמור על החיים המשותפים בינינו.
Jewish settlement leaders are the latest now to meet with Israeli Prime Minister, who is looking to satisfy all sides as the date crawls closer to when the government will vote on a partial annexation of Judea and Samaria or the West Bank. The Yesha Council leaders have been protesting against the US administration's peace plan, rejecting the prospect of Palestinian statehood. Now, Netanyahu will be attending this meeting with updates after his latest conversation with the peace plan's architect. Aaron Porras has more.
A military boost is ordered across Israel in preparation for potential Palestinian unrest ahead of July 1st. As leading Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu counts the days before that vote on a proposal to annex portions of Judea and Samaria or the West Bank. Defense Minister Benny Gantz ordering Israel's defense forces to step up preparations amidst a recent wave of terror incidents.
נעשה את הכל להפעיל את הכוח במידה הנדרשת מתוך כוונה לצמצם ככל האפשר את הנפגעים, אבל נהיה כמובן חייבים לשמר את רמת הביטחון גם בעונה שכזאת. סך הכל המדינה לדעתי יכולה וצריכה לדעת להתמודד עם תקופת אי-יציבות שכזו ונתקדם קדימה.
That's when the government will decide whether to extend Israeli sovereignty to settlements and the Jordan Valley, a 30% portion of the area. The fast-approaching date prompting a flurry of diplomacy, with top U.S. officials reportedly holding separate conference calls with both Netanyahu and Gantz overnight. Netanyahu, for his part, speaking with Jared Kushner, who played a key role in drafting President Donald Trump's Middle East Peace to Prosperity plan, mulling the best approach. A busy phone line with the White House envoy on Israeli-Palestinian peace and both the U.S. ambassador to Israel and Israel's envoy to the U.S. also on the call. And according to Israeli news channel 13, due to the current domestic unrest over the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis last week and the economic impact of COVID-19, the Americans are wanting to downplay enthusiasm for an imminent move. Gantz, speaking with U.S. Ambassador to Israel David Friedman Monday, the blue and white leader's stance, though, is less clear than Netanyahu's. Gantz has endorsed the U.S. plan, but believes annexation should be a coordinated effort with relevant players, like the Palestinians and Jordan. The coalition deal between the two leaders means that as long as Netanyahu can secure a parliamentary majority, the Prime Minister has the right to proceed even without Gantz's support.
Well, you'll remember last week we spoke with the sister of an Israeli woman who was murdered last year, allegedly by her husband. Lily Ben-Ami, in the wake of her sister Michal Seller's death, one of thousands of women taking to the streets of Tel Aviv, demanding more be done to stamp out domestic violence.
A peaceful protest in Tel Aviv, in contrast to the issue they're shouting about. Thousands rallying along the beachfront calling for government action to end violence against women. Organizers say most of the $71 million approved 3 years ago for national programs against domestic violence have not yet reached relevant hands.
71 נשים נרצחו מאז אושר אותו תקציב. ושמים סוף לאלימות.
11 women have been killed in Israel since the start of the year, with a rash of murders over the past 2-month coronavirus lockdown period.
In other news, move over New Year's Eve because COVID-19 is the new resolution starter, inspiring thousands of Israelis to finally ditch their addictions to nicotine.
Now, even with a pandemic, there seems to be a silver lining, as more than 51% of Israeli smokers aged 18 to 24 are now seriously considering quitting. And at the very least, nearly half of all Israeli smokers are also reportedly smoking less than usual. This, according to the Israel Cancer Association on Sunday, as the world marks International No Tobacco Day, where the World Health Organization focuses on protecting teens and young adults from the tobacco industry's marketing and manipulations. But it's not just marketing and manipulations that has Israelis giving up their cigarettes. Continually rising prices and now the coronavirus are mainly to blame. Habitual smoking is a main source of comorbidity with the virus, which heavily affects victims' breathing. And already at least 80,000 Israelis have died in the last decade from smoking-related illnesses. That's over 8,000 deaths per year, or 22 deaths in Israel alone every single day. As for allegations that smokers are actually less likely to contract COVID-19, deeper studies suggest that these reports are based on faulty logic. Still, all that said, the study also finds that nearly a third of Arab Israelis and 8% of Israeli Jews reported a family member starting to smoke amidst the COVID-19 pandemic.
Now, Israeli air defences are also being stepped up with the unveiling of the Israel aerospace industry's latest artillery system. Nittany Manson has the story.
3, 2, 1. This is LoRa, or the Long Range Artillery Weapons System. And what you're looking at here in this demonstration is LoRa's ballistic missiles slamming into tiny targets at sea. Now, this is the newest ballistic missile system developed by IAI, or Israel Aerospace Industries, a company best known for its Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 defense systems. Take a look at this. At a whopping 400 kilometers, or 250 miles away from its target, the missile is launched, and as you can see, the accuracy is impressive. The LoRa system can be launched either from sea or by land, and both Israel and Azerbaijan are already thought to be operating the LoRa system, with plans to sell to other countries too.
Now moving south to the city of Eilat, the typically luscious coral reefs off of the Eilat coasts are hurting bad. According to a new survey by the Environmental Protection Ministry, up to 75% of the reefs have been severely damaged by recent storms. Just 2 months ago, a series of unseasonable storms flashed past the Middle East, wreaking havoc in its wake. Infrastructure on and around the beaches in Eilat all sustaining enormous damages. And the coral reefs, some as deep as 10 meters underwater, were not spared. The Environmental Protection Ministry explaining that in the past, such mortality events were mainly caused by extremely low tides and exposure of the coral to the air. But a coral death of this magnitude has never been recorded in Eilat ever, where the reefs are thought to be unusually resistant to global warming. So where are the damages from? Well, early results find that most were caused by the breaking of large coral colonies in the waves and then the covering of those colonies with sand. But now for the good news, thanks to a 2019 initiative to remove waste from the Gulf of Eilat, the damages could have been much worse. And Environmental Protection Minister Gila Gamliel is promising to do everything in her power to restore the reefs without disruption.
Now, with an economy battered by the coronavirus, Israel's new environmental protection minister is looking to see the opportunity in the chaos. Gila Gamliel is proposing the country looks at investing in sustainable projects to reduce greenhouse gases and pollution, saying the country should ensure it's prepared for potential future crises within the environment.
גיבשנו גם מתווה יציאה ממשבר הקורונה להשקעה לטווח ארוך בסביבה שלנו, שתחזק את החוסן הכלכלי והחברתי של אזרחי ישראל, בכלכלה מעגלית, בהתמודדות עם משבר האקלים, בטכנולוגיות קלינטק, בהפחתת זיהום האוויר מהתחבורה ועוד ועוד. העבודה עוד רבה.
In other news, new sampling of old discoveries now changing everything we thought we knew about some of the region's ancient inhabitants. Nittany Manson has the story.
You might not expect it, but what you're seeing here is the DNA of one of the world's most famous texts. And not just any text, but fragments of the ancient Dead Sea Scrolls, a collection of thousands of fragments of old Jewish scriptures and writings dating back 2 millennia. So what's so important about the scroll's DNA?
After the beginning of this research, we all thought that the majority, or the scrolls were written on goatskin. But 2 results tell us that it's a cowhide. Okay, so we have 2 fragments that turned out to be cowhide, which means that at least these 2 were not from the area. Okay, they came from elsewhere. Where they came from, we still don't know, but we do know that we can differentiate between them and they are from outside.
Essentially, researchers believe that the ancient collection first discovered in 1947 just east of Jerusalem was scrawled by a fringe Jewish sect, the Essenes. By sequencing the DNA of the fragments, scholars can better investigate this claim, as well as uncover details of ancient life long thought lost.
This project made me reappreciate the materiality of the Dead Sea Scrolls, namely that the very material, the biological material of which the scrolls are made is as telling and as informative as the content of the text. And this is, I think, a very important lesson for all of us, that Second Temple Judaism, Second Temple Jewish society has been much more plural and multifaceted than many of us tend to think.
Finally, as a side bonus, this new sequencing might also prevent future fakes from popping up.
The scrolls that we tested were authentic. We know that they are real, they're not forged. But since we can distinguish scrolls that originated from Qumran, from other scrolls, we think that maybe in the future it could help identify real versus false scroll pieces.
That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week.